Shalom Israel. I'd like to give all praise and honor to Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahushai, Waha, Waka, Kadash. Today's going to be a special one. It's going to be a special lesson. So the reason why it's going to be a special lesson is because the Most High, Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahushai, presented me with a gift on the hottest day of the year. So I don't know if you could remember the hottest day of the year. That was about 3 weeks ago, when it was as hot in England as it was in Africa. So on that particular day, the Most High gifted me with a book. Literally, I saw this book on the road. So I want Yashala to take a look at it. Right. So when I read through the book, I realized that this book was packed full of Hebrewism, was packed full with historical information and data that empirical data. In other words, data that you can use in a court to it can be used in a court as evidence, right? So when I realized what kind of a book that this was, I said, no, I have to do a lesson on it. So first of all, let me show the cover again. It's dealing with the Amazon, right? So most of us that know about South America know that the Amazon, or most of the Amazon, exists within what we now know as Brazil. So first of all, I want to do is establish what Brazil means. So let me go into the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, page 70. So I'm going to show you, as I always do. So take a screenshot of that, and then I'm going to break it down for you. Right. So it has here Barazayal or Barazayal. But bearing in mind, the letter R would have had a ah sound, right, when it's spelled, right? So the way it's spelled and the way that it's pronounced would be slightly, it might look slightly different from how we know Brazil is. But bearing in mind, if you look at the major letters that form the word Brazil, you've got the B, which would be the ba, you've got R, the B would be the ba, you've got R, you've got Z, you have I, and you have L. Some people spell it with an S, but the spelling I know is Erazil. So all of those letters can be found in, let me find it, because it's in reverse. Yeah. So all of those letters, if you look closer, you'll see that all of those letters exist in that word there, right? So now I'm going to tell you the meaning of the word. It means made of iron. So what makes that meaning especially important is because in Deuteronomy 33, when Ahshar, as Moses, when he was about to depart, what he did, he called all of Israel, and just like our ancestors before, he gave them like prophecies, and he gave them, just like Israel did before. Sorry, he gave the children of Israel prophecies and blessings. You could say that blessings and prophecies as to what would happen, right? So when you look at, let me find it first. It's dealing with Ahshar, because we that are under the One West school of thought, we adhere to the 12 tribe chart. So in the 12 tribe chart, Ahshar is defined as, I think it's from Colombia down to Argentina, yeah, on the southeastern part of South America, yeah. So let me show you something here in the Bible. here, the highlighted bit, right, Deuteronomy 33. Now I'm going to read it out, but I just want to show you it, yeah? Right. So here, let me read it out. So this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 33, and verse 24. And of Ahshar, he said, let Ahshar be blessed with children, let him be acceptable to his brethren, let him dip his foot in oil. And by the way, Venezuela is regarded as having either the most reserves of oil or the second most reserves of oil on the planet. So that's dealing with the oil. Trinidad has oil as well. Guyana has oil as well. Brazil has oil as well. But not only will thy shoes shall be Salakia, not only shall he be acceptable to his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil, verse 25, but this is the important bit now. Thy shoes shall be iron and brass. So iron is actually the name of Brazil. And by the way, they do contain iron ore and brass ore as well. But the key here is the iron bit. So Brazil in Hebrew means iron. Right, so let's get into the lesson based on the book, right? So first off, I'm going to go into page 5. So on page 5, the importance of page 5. So as always, I'm going to show you the pages so that you can screenshot it and you can go through the data on your own time. So this is page 5. Yep. So I hope you can screenshot that. Right. So let me read it out. Page 5. On our early trips. Oh, Salakia, I didn't read the name of the author and the name of the book, although I showed it to you. So let me read it out. So the name of the author is Sue Bamford and Oriel Glock. The name of the book is Last Frontier, Fighting Over Land in the Amazon. Right? So yeah, so let me get into it now. Page 5. On our early trips, we saw pure Indians. So bearing in mind the two authors are English women. So, like every other nationality, what they tend to do is impose their beliefs or their ideologies or their understanding onto any new thing that they see. So, in other words, everything that a person sees is distorted by the way they view life and the way they understand life. So, for English people, they understood life based on racial stratification or racial classification, meaning if my brother was extremely dark and I was extremely fair, but we had the same mom and the same dad, they would classify us as different races, even though we are genetically of the same pedigree. So this is the way that they understand races or different groups of people. So after explaining that, let me read it again. On our early trips, we saw few pure Indians, though it was clear from the slanted eyes, high cheekbones, and straight black hair, which, by the way, is a perfect definition of my grandmother. And some of my relatives have those features as well. Straight black hair. Some of the local inhabitants, that a number of them had Indian ancestors. So what they're trying to say is that the Asian looking, or what they call the Mongoloid looking phenotype, they classify that as the Indian phenotype. So they saw people of mixed appearance, but they had enough of those features for them to say, as far as they were concerned, that they had Indian ancestors. The little directed contact we had was not encouraging. Right, so I'm just going to deal with the highlighted parts because there's a lot of information. So let me go to the next bit now. Indians call caras pretas. So the importance of caras pretas is anybody that speaks Portuguese, I know it a little bit. Caras means face, and pretas means black in Portuguese. So this is actually confirming that there was Indians that had black faces, or at least that were called black faces, right? Because they were nicknamed Caras Pretas, right? So that's page 5. So then I'm going to jump to page 7 and see what's on there. Alright, so on page 7, show you. Take a screenshot because there's a lot of information there. Right, page 7. And the Indians, why was the government doing so little to protect the Indian people when so many were dying as a result of their initial contact with the encroaching society? Was it already too late? So that was the question being asked. Was it already too late? Yeah, so they asked the question, why was the government doing so little to protect the Indian people when so many were dying as a result of their initial contact with the encroaching society? So that's Edomite language for saying they were well aware that when the Edomites and the Gawaians were coming amongst our people or encroaching upon our people were dying, right? Mysteriously of plagues and illnesses. Yeah? So that's Edomite code for that explanation. Was it already too late? Question mark. Were the Indian people doomed to destruction? Right. So that reminds me of a statement in the Bible where it says, "Is Israel a homeborn slave?" Right. So it reminds me of that. And then here I have Deuteronomy 28:60-62. So I'm going to go into that. Deuteronomy 28. Yeah, 60-62. So here's the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verses 60-62. Verse 60. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. Verse 61. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. Meaning, in addition to all the plagues and all the destruction that the Lord did in Matazarim in Egypt, there's going to also be other things that he's going to do that were unknown to Yasha'Allah in Egypt. Verse 62. And ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou because thou wouldest not obey the voice of the Lord thy God. Right, so let's continue. Right, there's another note at the end here, which it mentions to examine the impact of the occupation process on the Indians. Meaning, what Esau tends to do is that they weaponize everything. So every single thing on the Esau system is used as a weapon, is used as a crafty counsel, Psalms 83 and Judith 5 mechanism to keep us in sin or to eradicate us. So what they were doing at that time, based on what this says, is that they were trying to study the phenomenon as to why it was when the Europeans or the Gawaian were encroaching on the Brazilians, the indigenous Aborigines, Brazilian Indians, why they were dying. So they were trying to analyze what was going on. So let me continue. Verse 7, then page 9 to 10. So let me jump to page 9 to 10. Page 9. It's going to start to get interesting. Page 9. Oh, sorry. Yep. The discovery. Indigenous Aborigine Amerindian Ibar Yasha'Allah. That's my notes. The original inhabitants of Brazil, bearing in mind I've already defined what Brazil means and that it's a Paleo-Hebrew word that means iron. The inhabitants of Brazil were the Indians. That's why I wrote what I wrote on top. So the Indians, what they call the Indians, which means savage, I think in Latin, it means savage, or at least to the Europeans, Indian means savage. But what it truly identifies is the original people that were there, or the people that were there before they got there, who they labeled Amerindians, but we know them to be Ibar Yasha'ala, which is why I wrote the notes the way I did, of whom there are about 180,000 today. So that's an estimate, but that's the figure they came up with. Well, listen to this. But some 5 million in the time of the discovery of Brazil. So the precept I read out before is actually linking up with this. Because what I'm trying to demonstrate now is the Hebrewisms that this book contains and the proof of who all of the indigenous people of the Americas actually are, because it's contained in their writings and it's contained in the writing of people that first met them. So let's go to page 10. Okay, let me show you this because it's got some interesting information. So I'll show you that page. Show you that page. Please take snapshots of it, and when you have the time, look through it because there's a lot of information on it. Right, page 10. So it mentions the first, I believe, the first explorer to arrive in Brazil. I think his name was Pedro Cabral, and it was in the year 1500. So let me see, that would be 1942. So that would be like 8 years after Columbus discovered so-called the Americas, and 2 years after Columbus visited Trinidad, which was in 1498. So this would be 2 years after that. So it's around the same time period. Right, so let me see what he has to write. Oh, this is important. Right. It was not originally intended to turn out this way. Under the Treaty of Tordesillas, so the Treaty of Tordesillas, signed in 1994, right, the Pope divided up the huge and at that time largely unknown area of South America, listen to this, between the expanding colonial empires of Spain and Portugal. So this is listing out that the Pope actually was the one that wrote up the paper bull and divided up South America between Portugal and Spain. So the southernmost bit of South America was allocated to Portugal, and the northernmost bit of South America was was handed over to the Spanish, which is why Christopher Columbus was the one that went to Trinidad, and that's why Colombia is named Colombia, because Colombia is named after Columbus as well. So this is listing out the history. This is giving you the empirical evidence, right? So let me jump down. Listen to this now. Gaspar de Carvajal, Orellana, because I think the L's are pronounced as a Y. So Gaspar de Carvajal, Orellana, fought with a group of Tapaya or Tapawaya, because the U would be what? Tapawaya Indians, right? And noted, listen to this, with amazement, that the women fought alongside the men. So our sisters was getting it in, right? And you know Jake as well. Jake's sister, she would get it in as well, right? But the northern tribes, they were fighting as well and getting it in as well. Listen to this. It is thought that Oriana called the tribe Amazons. So the reason why he will call them Amazons is self-evident, but they're going to explain it here. After the ancient legendary Slakia, after the ancient legendary nation of female warriors described by the Greek writers Herodotus and Diodorus, and in this way indirectly named the river. So that's the reason why the river is called the Amazon River, and that's why that region was called the Amazon. So it's called the Amazon because when they first landed there, they met some warrior women. They met some strong Hebrew Israelite women that were backing their men and fighting for their children and their families, and that amazed them, right? Let me see what else. Oh, there's another piece of crucial evidence in here now, because one of the keys to determine a Hebrew Israelite is the curses, and one of the curses is slavery. So we tend to focus on the transatlantic slavery, which was predominantly the West Coast Africans being transported to the Americas and other parts of Europe. We focus on that. But what we tend not to focus on is that the Americans, the northern tribes, they were being enslaved for hundreds of years before the transatlantic slavery started. So I want to list some, Salakia, the book's going to list some of that here. So it reads, let me read it. Only in the delta itself was large-scale tropical farming possible, with the setting up of sugar plantations, listen to this, using African slaves. So they're listing out that certain brothers from the west coast of Africa, which in this instance would have been the Angolans and the Congolese, maybe some of the brothers from Saint Tome as well, and Mozambique. They would have been this way because they would have been the people that were directly under the domination of the Portuguese in particular, right? Yeah, the rest of the Amazon forest was plundered, not developed, which is what they do because they regulate to plunder. So there's a name drop here. So they dropped a name here, which can be linked historically, and it could be used to validate the claim. So they said by the Portuguese crown in 1621, when King Philip IV created a separate state of Maranhão and Grão-Pará, which dealt directly with Portugal. So you can actually research that and you can validate what this information is saying. So it's nice when they name drop because you could use the names and pair it up with history. Then it says, listen to this. Nevertheless, they were, let me go higher up to get the context. The Indians had greater prestige and influence here than elsewhere in Brazil. Nevertheless, they were fundamentally regarded as subhuman, meaning that they were seen as less than the Europeans or less than the Goyim. So we know in reality that we are more than the Goyim. We are God's chosen pick, but because of our sin, the roles have been reversed. So what this is listing out that the Indians, just as we, the Hebrew Israelites that tend to look Negro or tend to be listed as black or whatever, we're always seen as at the bottom. This is listing out that the Indians as well were seen as being at the bottom. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to link up what this says with empirical evidence. So this, I don't know if anybody knows about this, but if you don't, you need to get one. It's called a Black's Law Dictionary. So this is the legal dictionary that predominant lawyers use. The other one being the Bouvier Law Dictionary. But those two dictionaries in particular are the standard, the empirical standard for all legal terms. So any legal term, you get the correct legal definition of it in this book. But what this book also has is the American Constitution. So I want to show you. So this is the bit that we're going to be looking at. But I want you to take a snap of that. Right. So I'm going to read it out because this was written in 1776 when the British were defeated by their colonists in America, and then they formed their own creation, which is the United States. So they wrote their own constitution, separating themselves from the British monarch and the British alleged constitution because they don't really have one. But they separated themselves from British rule and they created their own rule. So listen to this. It's in Article 1 of the Constitution of the United States of America. It's in the fourth paragraph. I'm going to read the whole thing and break it down because it's written in legal language so that if you're not familiar with legal terminology, it's gonna fly over your head, right? So I'm gonna break it down for you. So listen to this. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned, shall be allocated among the several states which may be included within the Union. So at that time was the 13 states. So it was 13 states they were referred to, right? Which actually was 12 because Washington was never listed as one of the states. So Washington was the capital, and then you had the other states, which was 12. So, well, they say 13 states. Um, According to their let me read that again. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which I listed a number, which may be included within this union. That's why it's called it was called the Union States. You had the Confederate States and the Union States, according to their respective numbers. Right. So what they did is the same way that surveys are done. So basically, if you have an area that consists of 1 million people, you can survey 10,000 people as a representation of the million. So it's like a division. Or you could even survey 1,000 people as a representation of the million. Or you could even survey 100 people. And believe it or not, they do that as well as a representation. So what they do, they work out, I forgot the actual, there's an actual name for the way that they equivalate the survey pool with the total. There's a way that they do it to validate it. But be that as it may, their form of government is representative government, right? So what it is, the people, meaning the people that have the power or the representative power to vote, they then pool their votes, and then who gets the required number of votes becomes, and it's not always the one that gets the most amount of votes. So it's a very weird system, but it's a representative system. So let me further go on. According to their respective numbers, listen to this, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons. So now what they're doing, they're putting limitations to who can be considered the people, right? So first off, you have to be listed as, let me read it again. You have to be listed as one of the groups that are listed as free persons, right? That's number one. Including those bound to service for a term of years. So those bound to service for a term of years would be like the Irish, um, some of the Scottish, um, some of the Europeans that came from Africa as well. I'll give an example: Madeira, because most people do not understand or know that Madeira is an island off of Africa. It's not off of Europe. It's an African island, but there was Europeans living there, and they came to the Americas under it's called indentured servants. So even while they were under the indenture, meaning they signed to work for 7 years, no more than 7 years, they were still able to vote, right? So I'm just listing out what it has there, right? Including those bound to service for a term of years, and listen to this now, excluding Indians, not taxed, so they're excluding Indians from the right to vote and the right to representation, meaning they've got somebody in the government that's seeking their interests. They're excluded from that, and listen to this, not taxed, so at least they're not taxed, but excluded. But listen to this, 3/5 of all other persons. So they've been technical here because they haven't listed black or Negro or African American or slave or descendant of a slave. But when you remove all the other variables, that's all that's left, right? And I use that same analogy sometimes when I'm trying to prove that our people are Hebrew Israelites. So what I tend to do is list out everybody else's nationality, i.e. Chinese, which would be Moab, Indian, which would be Elam, European, that would be Esau. I list out everybody else's nationality, and what's left has to be Hebrew Israelites, because there's nothing left. Everything else is filled. So this is the same analogy here, and I wrote it down at the bottom for you to see. So this is where the 3/5 of a human being comes from, but it's coded. So if you don't understand legal writing, this will fly over your head. But that's what that means, right? So I broke that down. Right. Yeah, I broke that down. So page 11. Listen to this now. Page 11. Nevertheless, they were fundamentally, so when it says they, the context is the Brazilian Indians. That's the context. So they meaning the Brazilian Indians, the indigenous Aborigines. To the lesson. Right. So let me go back again. So this is page 10 to page 11. Page 10. Nevertheless, they were fundamentally regarded as subhuman. I showed you what that meant in the American Constitution. A particularly skillful animal. So they're listing them as animals, right? Whereas they're the animals, because Gawayim, it means other nations. It also means beasts. So, they're the beasts, not us. But anyway, be that as it may, which could be peddled like expensive cattle. So that's where the term chattel slavery comes from. So this is listing out the same curses that the Negro or the African, what they call the African American slaves went through, is listing out the same thing, right? It can be sold in chattel slavery. They're seen as subhuman. They're captured for sale as slaves. Proof. Let me show you. Proving it, right? Their capture for sale as slaves became a key factor in the exploration of isolated regions. So they used the slaves to scout and navigate the land to go deeper into the Amazon. Imbued with what today seems unbelievably cultural arrogance and inhumanity, the Goans have always been. I don't know why they're shocked. The Portuguese explorers, the Portuguese Gawayim and Yabyam Nawar, also carried out the infamous punitive expeditions, listen to this, or just wars, so they're calling their wars just, which it could never be just, horrific incursions into the jungle with a specific intention of massacring Indians, right? And then it's going to list the amount of Indians, I believe. Yeah, listen to this. Pedro Teixeira boasted that after 30 years at the head of expeditions along the Negro and Amazon rivers, and I'm going to get into Negro and Amazon rivers in a minute as well. The Negro and Amazon rivers, he had been responsible, so he's boasted, for the death of 2 million Indians. So we boast about Malak Dawada because he took out the Canaanites and the Philistines by the tens of thousands. My guy's boasting about millions, and not 1 million, 2 million. He's boasting of massacring or having a hand in massacring. Let me get it back again. 2 million Indians, right? So that's incredible. That number, that's an incredible number. But bearing in mind, it wasn't just physical slaughter. It was also the transmission of viruses and illnesses which they had no immunity to. So the Most High, He would make sure that Yasha Allah would be free of illness and free of plague, so long as they kept the law, statutes, and commandments, right? But the minute they started transgressing, that's a judgment. So that's a form of judgment. But you always kept a remnant. So let me see. So Daniel 11-12, page 13. So on page 13 is an illustration of something that Edom does all the time. So what Edom does is they like to create a monopoly of assets or of wealth, and at the same time they like to destabilize any other nation that has a monopoly. So at this particular time, Brazil had a monopoly on the rubber plant. So this is news to me because I always thought that rubber came from Indonesia, Malaysia. Come to find out, let me read it. Page 13. The towns of Balam, Balak and Balam, and Manaus developed rapidly as a result of the rubber trade, but their prosperity was very precarious as it was highly dependent on rubber. Other economic activities were seriously neglected. So let me get to the point now. For the rubber trees were scattered over vast areas because what it was, they weren't planting them, they were growing naturally. And the indigenous people, they knew where to source them. So if they needed rubber to cover their thatch roofs or to put underneath the sole of their sandals or whatever. They knew how to get it, right? They knew how to collect it. But as a business concern, it was difficult. And by the way, this is the same thing that was happening to the Congolese. So just check that, because the Congolese were the Africans mentioned here that was brought to Brazil. And the same thing happened to them as well, where Leopold was cutting their hands off. But that's another story anyway. I don't want to stray too much. But this is the point here. Listen to this. In 1876, an Englishman stole some of the seedlings out of the Amazon and raised them in Kew Gardens, the same Kew Gardens that we know in London. These were then used to set up huge plantations in Malaya or Malaysia, as the trees were organized in a much more compact fashion, meaning they weren't randomly growing. They grew it like as an agricultural venture, so they were more productive, let's put it like that. Rubber could be produced at incomparably lower cost than in the Amazon. So that was a means of cutting the cost and breaking the monopoly that the Portuguese in Brazil had, right, and destabilizing the price. So that's the that was the point of that. Let's see. Just listen out what they do. Page 18. So let's go to page 18 and see what's there. But there's a lot more than what I'm bringing out in now, by the way. I'm just trying to condense it, but there's a lot of information in this. Right, so page 18, let me show you the highlighted bit. So take a snapshot and then read it at your leisure. Page 18. I was born and bred here. So this is an indigenous, a Hebrew Israelite, indigenous to Brazil, otherwise known as an Amerindian. This is him speaking here. I was born and bred here. If I don't have rights here, meaning if you don't have rights where you're born in your own yard, then I don't have them anywhere. And that's a fact. That's a statement of fact. My father died here. My mother died here. My husband died here. So obviously it was a woman. It was Aqua. They were all buried in the cemetery here. Let me show you. Because just that alone, for me, is enough proof. Can you see it? Just that alone, it's in the Bible, by the way. It's the way that we speak in the West Coast Africa. It's the way that we speak in the Americas. It's the way that we spoke biblically. So just that alone is enough proof for me. But there's so much more. How it hurts to think that I've suffered so much injustice, and it's worse because it's all happened now that I'm old. So the sisters is Zakwanwaf. To see my children suffering, lacking everything, sounds like the curses. Everybody wants this land now because now it's easier to live here. It's been tamed. There are roads. It seems that just us who were born and brought up here, just us don't have any rights. So when I read the American Constitution, did it not show the two groups that did not have rights to representation? The Indians, not taxed, or the Indians excluded, meaning they're not a part of it, not taxed, and all other 3/5, which would have been the slaves or the Negroes, right? So this is validating that. And the next page, page 19. Let me see if it's redundant or if there's anything here. Oh yeah, there's an example of crafty counsel. So let me show you that. Example of Psalms 83 crafty counsel. I'm going to read it out. Dear Anna Donna Anna added, all the authorities were against us. Sounds familiar? Social services, police, government, everybody, basically, right? Everybody. All the authorities, all the people that have power or authority over us were against us. And they list out some here. Local police, judge, state police, governor, everyone. Basically what I just said. That's deep. And here we are in the state that you see us. Listen to this. And this little grandson of mine, we haven't even got milk for him. All of us are going hungry. And you know what's the funny thing about this? The funny thing about this is, I was in Trinidad during the coup. So the coup took place in, let me see if my memory is correct. It took place in 1990, around August, I believe. Yeah, around August. August the 27th or August the 29th, 1990. And it went on until the end of the year and the following year. So that was like a mini revolution that took place in Trinidad. But the funny thing is that they had warehouses of milk, and what they did, they shut down the transportation of the milk, so nobody was able to get milk. But at the same time, I think for humanitarian reasons, they had shipped milk to, I think it was either Jamaica or Grenada. So while the people in Trinidad were unable to get milk, now I know they're Hebrew Israelites as well, so I'm not trying to say that they should not have given them milk, but it was a political thing they were doing. So they were trying to make out that, oh, they're helping people and they're good people, while their own people were suffering. So this is what this is listing up as well. So I can relate to this because I lived through that. I had a young daughter at the time, 1990. She would have been 4 years old at that time, and yeah, we lived through that, right? So what this is saying is resonating with me. So let's see, page 90. And then there's a big jump here, so we're going to jump to page 100. So let me go to page 100 and see what's going on there. Like I said, there's a lot of information in between, but I'm just condensing it because otherwise the lesson's going to be way too long. So I'm on page 100, right? So most of the things I'm showing you can be precepted in Deuteronomy 28, one of the verses in Deuteronomy 28, Psalms 83, which is a demonstration of the crafty counsel, and most of them could be found there. So I don't want to be constantly repeating the precepts, right? So let me read it. I think this one is a statement of truth. No, it's not that one. Anyway, the blood of our people can no longer be contained in our veins, seeing our tiny reserves, the remains of 8 million square kilometers of this, our beloved Brazil, which in the Hebrew means iron, right, over which the Indian people, Ahshar, had full dominion and right of occupation, being usurped by disorganized and destructive. I'm just going to read it verbatim. White people, because that's what it has written here. And by the way, this book was written by two white English women. So it's her words, right? White people, disguised as farmers, but with the spirits of vandals, right? So that's where the term vandalism comes from. Today, my people see their lands invaded, their forests destroyed, their animals exterminated, and their hearts lacerated by this brutal weapon that is civilization. So this is even written in biblical phraseology, because when it says their hearts lacerated, they're talking about their mind. It's the same way it's used in the Bible, right? And let me continue. For the I had to use it verbatim. I don't like to use the term, but it's what it says. Let me show you, right? Just to back up that I'm not just making it up. Can you see why there? Is it? Yeah. Let me get there. So you can see I'm not just throwing out words. Yeah. For the white and so-called civilized people, this may seem like romanticism or something like it. And by the way, did you catch it said so-called civilized? Does that not sound like a Hebrew Israelite there? So-called civilized people, this may seem like romanticism or something like it, but for our people, no. For it is a way of life. It is our reason to live, and therefore reason enough to die. So this brother, is it a brother? It could be a sister, could be a brother, but be that as it may, they're in the right spirit. right? Because we're not supposed to be in a spirit of fear. So this, whoever this Jake was, because I know through the spirit, this is a Jake. Jay in the spirit, because that's the same way that I would speak, and that's the same way that all the brothers in the truth, all the brothers I know in the truth, would speak. Let me continue. To tell the truth, the Indian, and this is an advice, so listen to this. To tell the truth, the Indian has to risk his life to get the white man off his lands. Because it isn't just now that we are under attack, this has been going on for 15 years. Well, I would add a couple zeros after the 15 years, right? So I would add maybe 2 zeros or even more afterwards. But it's been going on for a substantial period of time. The violence is continuous, right? Because why? Because Esau has a perpetual hatred for Yasha'Allah, right? The scriptures validate that. Nearly every month, we have to have some rights, some law that will protect the Indians. So the only right and law that protects Yasha'Allah, in this context Indian, but we know it's our people, is the law, statutes, and commandments. And that's when we're in the kingdom. So what this is validating is that we're not in our rest. And I would agree with that. So that's page 100. Let me continue. Here it says, for some reason it says page 203. So let me just jump to page 203 because that's not flowing with the way I've got the numbers listed. But let me just go to page 203 because I've got it there. So let me just go there. Oh, so it might be out of context, but it's an important piece of information. So take a snapshot of the highlight bits. Right. So what this is listed out here. So let me just say it. They suffered from chronic dysentery. So chronic dysentery is an illness you get when you're drinking contaminated water or you're eating contaminated food, and as a result of that, you're consistently going to the toilet. So what happens is you waste away, and even if you eat, it just goes straight out, right? So it's called dysentery. It actually happened in Haiti, right? So what happened in Haiti is being listed as happening here. So let me continue to read it. They suffered from chronic dysentery because the water they drank, see, was polluted by cattle dung. Right? The lands were occasionally sprayed, listen to this, with the defoliant. So a defoliant is an agent used to strip vegetation from a large area of land. So it's called a defoliant. It's highly acidic, it's highly poisonous. So there's a famous case of a Vietnamese girl that was hit with Agent Orange, which is what this thing is, I'm going to call it out. And she was running naked with her skin peeling off, and a photographer took the picture. And to date, is one of the most famous images of the Vietnam War. So we're talking about the same agent. So let me continue to read it. They suffered from chronic dysentery because the water they drank was polluted by cattle dung. The lands were occasionally sprayed with the defoliant Torden 155, a form of Agent Orange. So that's the name of the chemical. That's the name of the chemical that they used in the Vietnam War as a weapon because the guerrillas were hiding in the jungle. So they used that as a weapon. So they used this against the Indians. Well, actually, let me read what they said. The condition of these Indians is a disgrace not only for Brazil but for mankind as a whole. Right? So let me continue. Page 120. Right, so that's more in keeping with the number sequence. So let me go to page 120. Oh, yes. So now I understand why I put it, because page 120 lists the same thing as well. So it was like a precept. So it's like a precept to the same information. So let me go again. Page 120. But even worse news was in store. In early 1984, evidence came to light that some of the companies earlier contracted to clear the jungle had used chemicals, probably, not probably, because further on it was established, definitely, right? But they say probably containing lethal Agent Orange. Um, yeah, right. So that's that. So I precepted it. That's why I put the other number there. So page 138. Let's go to page 138. And bearing it in mind, the Most High gave me this book, and it's funny enough. This is the area of study that I'm most interested in at the moment because it relates to my history and also my people's history collectively, meaning Yasha'Allah collectively, Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom. But in particular, it relates to Trinidad, it relates to Guyana, it relates to South America. So, this is my area of interest at the moment. So, the Most High literally gave me a book in the area and the topic that I'm most interested in for free on the hottest day of the year. So if that's not a testament, I don't know what is. Because I didn't buy it, but I would have bought it if I could. So let's see, 138, then 140. So I've got here a declaration of truth. So that means that whatever this person said, so when it's in quotations like that, this is the indigenous Indian speaking, and then the other writing would be the journalist or whatever. So what they do, it's a way that writers use to show that somebody else is talking. This is the way that they do it. So I know that this is the Jake speaking here. So let me read it. There has been an exacerbation of the conflict. An exacerbation means an increase or a furthering, right? So in the scriptures it says they furthered our affliction. There's been a furthering of the conflict between. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. Between oppressors and oppressed, due to the situation of glaring social inequality. The injustice in the occupation and use of the land has grown worse as a result of the pressure exercised by large companies on those who live on and from the land, which would be Ahshar, right? Um, this pressure is also being exercised on the Indian population, on the indigenous Aborigines, or Ahshar, or Bani Ahshar, let's say that, which has been progressively destroyed by the reduction of the size of its reserves, by forced migration, by diseases contracted from the expansion front of rural capitalism. The abiding injustice has been maintained by mechanisms of institutionalized violence, basically Psalm 83, right? Judas 5, 583, Numbers 22 to 24, I believe. All of these crafty councils, right? Complacency or connivance of the authorities, and thus provoking desperate reactions which provides a pretext for even more violent repression, right? And I marked a declaration of truth because what this person is saying, this person's in the spirit, right? They're speaking as our ancestors, as our prophets of old, because they're saying things regardless of the consequences or fear of repercussions. Because obviously, saying something like that to a journalist, you're basically signing your own death warrant, basically. But when you're in the spirit, you say it. You don't even think of what you're saying. You just say it. Because the Most High will use your word, your mouth, to bring it out. As we always say, bring it out, right? Then 140. So I forgot to go to 140. I got to 140. But that hit hard. I don't know if you felt it, Yashala, but I tell you what, that hit hard. So yeah. Ooh. Alright, so let me get this one. 140. Methods of bribery and corruption, which is Esau and the Goyim, they're very skilled and adept at this. particular thing. Methods of bribery and corruption in direct opposition to the people's interests. Sounds familiar? And basically every single ruler of a Caribbean island or even a West Coast African island have the same issue. Their rulers or the people that are established to represent them are being bribed and corrupted, and therefore the interests of the people are not being met. That's basically what this is saying. An economic model which concentrates income and promotes sophisticated consumerism, sounds familiar? At the expense of the basic needs of the population. I mean, this could be prophetic because this was written in 1985. We're in 2022, and this person is perfectly describing society in Britain, perfectly. So this could be prophetic. There we go. Has made us into one of the countries with the greatest disparity, which is a wealth gap. So they're explaining that at that time Brazil had the greatest disparity, wealth gap, between the highest, which would be the Edomites and the Goyim, and the lowest income groups, which is always us, wherever we may be. So that's one of the curses as well, right? So it's listing out the curses. Let's see. Page 181. This might be one of them long ones, Israel, but the information is vital. It's crucial information, right? Because there's a lot of I forget what they call them because I switch them off as soon as I hear them. But they're these camps that believe that Judah, Benjamin, and Israel only are the Israelites. So they tend to focus more on West Coast Africa and the black-looking Hebrew Israelites that are predominantly found in North America and some of the islands. But I find that so divisive because within my family, I have family members that look as dark could be, and I have family members that look fair almost to the point, not being white, not that fair, but being like Puerto Rican or Latino fair, right? It's a kind of milky, basically like how Malak Dawada was listed as being they call it tawny, so it's a fair complexion, but it's not Edomite complexion. It's not wasted away, let's put it like that. Right, so yeah. So where was I? 181. Did I read that? Yeah. So listen to this. So let me show you it first. Right. 181. The Indians attach a religious significance to their lands. So that would be a throwback of the significance we attach to Yasha Allah, to the land of Israel. Right? So we saw it as our motherland, right? They attach a religious significance to their land, which means, listen to this, that normally, meaning unless they're forced and coerced and bullied, they are not willing to sell them even if they are offered a fairly large sum of money. Why? Because all the tribes were sanctioned a portion, except for the Levites or Lawaya, because he's the most highest portion. And that's why tithes come into play. Because they weren't given a portion of land, the other tribes have to sustain them and give them a portion of their crops and a portion of their cattle and so on and so forth, right? But each tribe was given a portion, and you could not sell your land. And even if you did sell your land in the Jubilee year, 7 years, you will have to return it. Right? Why? Because the Most High set it up like that. So this is a Hebrewism, another Hebrewism as well. So they are not willing to sell them, even if they are offered a fair amount. Listen to this. No one sells his or her own son or his mother. So they're applying logic now. Because they ask them, why you don't want to sell the land? No one sells his own son or his mother because he loves them. In the same way, it is an absurd idea right, for an Indian, Hebrew Israelite, to sell his land. He continued later, an Indian is an Indian, a Hebrew Israelite is a Hebrew Israelite, listen to this, and can't change himself any more than he can change the blood that runs in his veins in the same way, right? So this is explaining the concepts, the same concepts that we use when we preach the word on the streets to our people that don't know their nationality and are caught up in Christianity. This is the same logic that we use, right? So it resonates with me. Listen to this. Even children are treated with great personal respect. An Indian will never take away a necklace given to a child, however high a price he or she is offered for it, right? And there's another key thing. Now, this, I want you guys to look at this. It's the last verse here. That watch it properly, right? And take a snapshot, right? You know why? Because this proves a point that some of the brothers bring out on the road. Because what happens is they'll look at a brother like me, or they might look at a brother like my Mashak, or my Daniela, or other brothers that have a fairer skin complexion. Even my Yeshaya, right? And they will look at them for face value, and they'll say, "Oh, you guys are mixed with Edomites or whatever, because your skin is fair, or you mixed race." So we don't believe in that anyway. But I'm just saying. But listen to what this is saying now. Many of the women made themselves infertile by using forest herbs. So what this is saying is they were being abused, they were being raped, they were being misused by the Edomites. But they actually knew how and what to do to ensure that demonite seed was not being carried on. So they were taking, for want of a better word, they were taking protection against being or being able to be pregnant, because they knew the herbs to take to shut down the fertility process. So it's listing it out. So when they say, "Oh, you lot are raped," that's what. No, not all of them were raped, and even if the women were raped, which they were, that does not mean that they conceived, which is what this is showing you. So this is crucial information. Let's see, boom, boom, boom. Ooh, this is a good one. Page 182. So this is a quick one. There's not much. Oh, wait a minute. Ooh, right. Yes, I have to show you this. Right. Very crucial information. Listen to this. We heard one landowner snare. So this whole concept of land ownership, this is a European thing, because our concept of land ownership wasn't that. Our concept was inheritance. The land was our mother. We inherit a portion, right, and we give that on to our children. That's our concept. Their concept is they own it and mine, and you can't go in it and da. Land ownership. That's a European way of looking at things. So let me read it out. We heard one landowner, Edomite or Goyim, snare, Indians are worse than animals. They are not even good to eat. There's a precept for that. So let's go there. Deuteronomy 28 and 55. Believe it or not, Hebrewism, right? So I'm in Deuteronomy 28 and 55. So that he will not give to any of them the flesh of his children who he shall eat. So they're mocking and saying, yeah, but they're not good to eat. See that? This is scriptural. This is spiritual, you know. Right. So there's another thing that's important here. If I could find it. Yeah. So it says that his land could be stolen, whose labor could be exploited for the benefit of the dominant economy, meaning for the benefit of Hawaiians, Amalek, Edomites, uh, Edomites, Moabites, Ammonites, Hites and Kites, Hamites, all the ites, right? Right. This is important here as well. Listen to this, and this is deep. Brazil, which is Hebrew for iron, Brazil should use the same extermination tactics which have been used against the Indians in the United States. So, in one sentence, they're listing out the fact that they use extermination techniques to eradicate the North American Indians, and at the same time, they're listing out that they intend to use the same techniques against the Brazilian indigenous people. In the same sentence, listen to this. At the same time, another current of opinion emerged. So that's another theory of how to deal with the Indian savage problem. Because that's what Indian just means savage. So they say Indian, but in their mind they say savage, right? So just like with us, they say black, but in their mind they say nigger. They don't say the words because they're scared to. But in their mind, they're not saying black, they say nigger, right? So let's go. At the same time, another current of opinion emerged. It came almost entirely from upper class scientists and philanthropists. Philanthropists. So lucky for that. So it's funny because when you look at what happened in the past 2 years, right? I'm not going to list the name of the virus, but we all know what we're talking about. It starts with co and it ends with video, right? So we know the virus, right? But the thing is, the most important people were the scientists and the philanthropists. So the philanthropists would be the people that had money and they were the ones that could get things going and they would start movements. So George Soros would be one, um, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, what's the name of the other one again? Um, like the Microsoft guy, Bill Gates. So all these people are seen as philanthropists. They're not scientists, but those people, along with scientists, are the people that navigate and that push the agenda forward. So this is what this is saying here. Heavily influenced by French positivism, they attacked the racist theories being taught at some of the universities and were strongly critical of the proposal that the Indians should be systematically exterminated. And this is documented. Look at this. Arguing that in time the Indians would become responsible citizens. So that's a counter theory. The counter theory is if we destroy their mind, they're going to join our society and then we're going to be able to benefit from their expertise, their creativity, their workforce. So rather than killing them off, kill their mind and then basically what they did to what the Greeks did in the Maccabee period, where they got when they first got Hebrew Israelites to accept the Greekish fashion. This is basically what they're listing out here. So this links to Maccabee. I think it's first or second Maccabees. I think it's first Maccabees. And then there's another highlighted bit. So I want to show you this bit again, although I've showed you the page. I need you to see this. Right? Why? Because this is Theodore Roosevelt. So Theodore Roosevelt was the president, was the presiding ruler of America when they removed gold as a standard of currency. So he was the one that signed the Gold Bullion Act, if my memory serves me correct. So that's important. Theodore Roosevelt, the former president of the USA, on a geographical expedition into a wild region of Brazil, his work became famous in Brazil and abroad. So he went into Brazil and I believe he conducted some theories. So there's something else I want to show you here dealing with World War II. Because Brazil and Argentina has the highest amount of Italians and Germans and Polish people as a result of World War II, and this is explaining why. As a result of World War II, large numbers of Europeans, Goans, Edomites, Ayadam Nawar, would immigrate to the Brazilian hinterlands. The government was thus anxious to create a series of emergency landing strips, right? So they facilitated them by creating landing strips. Um, oh yeah, listen to this. So this is page 185. Albuquerque, Lima. Let me give you the date as well. In March 1968, Albuquerque, Lima gave a press interview in which he announced some of the conclusions reached in the report. So apparently, actually, let me get that because I'm citing a report. So let me get the report. Criticisms were voiced at home and abroad, and the government began to be accused of genocide, meaning mass killings. Detractors dubbed the SPI the Service for the. You couldn't make this up. Let me read this. I'm sorry, Israel, but you couldn't make this up. Detractors dubbed the SPI the Service for the Prostitution of the Indians. In 1967, General Alfonso Augusto de Albuquerque Lima, the new interior minister under President Arthur da Costa e Silva, instructed Jader Figueiredo, the prosecutor general, to investigate the charge. So that's the report. At the end, presented a 5,115-page report. So that's the report is listing, right? So in the report, let me show you the highlighted bit which says conclusions reached in the report. He said that widespread corruption and sadism had been discovered, extending from sugar to the removal of an 11-year-old girl to work as a maid for an SBI official. So they're just showing you the crafty, evil wickedness of Esau. Page 191. Page 191. Page 191. Oh, this is beautiful. So take a look at it. The highlighted bit, and see the notes on top. Spirit bear witness. So actually, let me get that. So that would be in Romans 8 and 16. Let me get that because I haven't brought out a precept in a while. Let me get that. Romans 8 and 16. Right. So let me read it first, and then I'll read the precept after. So this is page 191. For several groups had occasionally intermarried with outsiders without becoming any less Indian. Right now, bearing in mind this was written by an Edomite, so they view things differently. So they would view an outsider as a Trinidadian woman, my mom, marrying a Jamaican man, my dad. They would view that as outsiders, or you might marry somebody from a foreign nation. But we don't view things like that, right? But anyway, this is how they looked at it. So let me just say it from their perspective. For several groups had occasionally intermarried with outsiders without becoming any less Indian, without becoming any less Hebrew Israelite. Listen to this. Eunice Durham, an anthropologist, see what I mean? Anthropologist, demonized, said, the only way, listen to this, the only way of knowing whether a person is an Indian or not is through the attitude of the Indian community towards him or her, right? And what do we say? We say the only way to know if somebody's a Hebrew Israelite is, so let me get it. This is the book of Romans chapter 8, verse 16, I believe it is. Verse 16. And it reads, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. So they've been listed as using the same mechanism to determine if somebody was of the people, right? So I'm just listing out the Hebrewisms and showing that even if our enemy is writing about us, because most of the books that we rely on, our enemy wrote or they rewrote it. We can still see the truth because we have a spirit of discernment, so we can read their writings and still see the truth contained within it. which is what I'm attempting to do now. So let me see, 191, jump to 196. It's supposed to be something nice on 196, so let's see. Ah, yeah, this is nice. So let me make sure there's none of it. Right, page 196. Right, page 196. Whatever they say, I'm reading it verbatim. Whatever they say, the whites have nothing to accuse us of. We are in the right. We must not let them interfere with our culture. Sounds good to me. If the white man offers us alcohol, which is what they do to keep us in sin, he should go to jail. In the kingdom, he will go to jail because this causes us harm. Right? Listen to this. It is bad for the Indian. If he makes use of our women, which is what they do, listen to this. He should go to jail. Sounds fair to me. Right? What is important is our life, our customs. We cannot give up these things to take on the ways of the white man. He's in the spirit. I didn't have to add. I just read what the Jake said. I didn't have to add to it, man. Yeah, because he's on point. We have everything. We must not lose it. So that's the same thing that's listed out in is it Revelation 2:9 when it says, "But thou art rich, rich in faith." It's explained in James, rich in faith. So this is what he's saying. We're rich. Listen to this now. If we lose our customs, which we did, ruin and destruction would put an end to the Indian, to the Hebrew Israelite. Because the way we live is what we are. Listen to this. Because we cannot live among the whites, I'm reading it verbatim, we do not live only for the present, right, which is true. We need the ground under our feet, a piece of land, not all the land, only a piece of it. We have asked the president, so this is getting into them asking the president, so I don't need to go there, but the statement that he made is correct. And then there's something he put at the bottom, let me get this. I believe it's the same person speaking here as well. To end our message of the Day of the Indian, so the Day of the Indian, you can liken that to the Day of Judgment or the Day of Yahweh's wrath, because that's when the roles are going to reverse. So I like the way you put that, the Day of the Indian. There we go. We wish to offer a little of our values to white society. Well, actually, we're going to be their teachers, right? Well, after the 1,000 years, they're going to get eradicated, but to the other nations, we're going to be their teachers. So this is in keeping somewhat, which is stripped of, oh yeah, values to white society, which is stripped of spiritual and human values. Right? These values you will find in the simple way we live our lives. He's in the sky, man. Alright, so 210 and 211. So let me go there. 210 and 211. So we're getting somewhere. Um, I'm not seeing anything on page 210. Oh, yeah, I see, yeah. Right. So because it's highlighted in yellow, my glasses have a slight tint. Right. So let me show 210, 210, 211, the highlighted bit. Right. So 210, let me read it. The Hashawakawaramai. Don't ask me to repeat that. Themselves suffered heavily in the beginning from the close contact with non-Indians. So a non-Indian, just like a non-Hebrew Israelite, would be considered a Goyim, right? So Goyim, right? They caught flu, which is a virus, venereal diseases, which are viruses, and other illnesses which weaken the group and cause some deaths. So this is listing some of the Deuteronomy 28 curses, but it's also illustrating where illnesses in the Americas originated from. Because according to what it says, according to what is written in the book, right? I'm trying to click two birds at once on here. So according to what's written in the book, well, actually, it's on the next. Yeah, it's on the next page. So I don't need to break it down. So let me just read the next page. Page 211. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. Outside the park, our lives were more carefree. There were no diseases. Listen to this, like measles, influenza, malaria, and those sicknesses white men give Indian women. Can't make it up. In the same time, we lived further to the south, Salakia, further to the north, outside the reserve and without white men. And you know me, I don't like to use that word, but I'm just reading it verbatim. I don't like to use that word. Why? Because I like to call them what they are. Yab yab nawa, you know. Adawam, Aishawa, you know. I like to call them what they are, but anyway. Without white men, our people were stronger. Indians only died when they were very old, right? So bearing in mind, when Moses died, he had his full capacity, he had his full strength, his full eyesight, everything. So this is listing out, it's correlating with what the scripture says as well. So we should be coming to the end now. Yeah, I'm going to read this because I kind of agree with this. So it says the solution to the Indians' problem, the solution to Yasha'Allah's problem, must come from Indians themselves, must come from Yasha'Allah themselves. We cannot rely on our enemies to give us rest. It doesn't make sense. Um, and it says they must unite and turn the invaders off their land. So that is only contingent on us returning to our laws, statutes, and commandments, our faith in Yahweh Shai Mashiach, and Yahweh, our great and awesome power. So that's when that will happen. Let me see. So 235. 235 is a quick one. So yeah, I'm gonna go there because it's quick. It's just basically showing you one of the usual suspects. So it's a name that you're gonna see written all over slavery. Take a snapshot. There's a highlighted bit. Right. It's basically just listing out Barclays Bank as a stakeholder, albeit small, in the banks in Brazil. So, not because Barclays Bank is predominantly a British bank, it wasn't investing in other forms of captivity and colonialism and slavery. It was. So that's proving that. And then, yeah, page 260, this is a good one. So I might have to skip some, but 260, I'm going to go there because I like what it says in 260. So let me get that. Right, so page 260. Let me get it. Yeah, I'm gonna read it out. I'm not even gonna show you. I just read it out. I always avoided any discussion with the priest after that. I knew that he would beat me. Indeed, although he was a great believer in dialogue. So if you notice, when you're interacting with the Edomites or with the Goliath, at first they come with this, oh yeah, let's have a dialogue, let's have a talk. They usually will say close the Bible and let's have a discussion. But very soon, especially when the precepts start coming out, you see the other side of them. So this is kind of validating that. So let me read that again. I knew he would beat me. Indeed, although he was a great believer in dialogue, Romero saw little point in trying to reason with Jantel Casaladaliga or any other of the priests, listen to this, as they are so prejudiced against us. So that's the point. And I brought that out last week Sabbath. It's pointless dialoguing with the demonites. It's no point. The only time you really should dialogue with them is for edification purposes. But it's no point because if they are a Hebrew Israelite that looks like the Edomite, the Spirit will bear witness. And I've run up against quite a few people like that. Some in Thornton Heath, some in Brixton, and other areas. I actually had a friend in Trinidad that, through the Spirit, I would say he was a Hebrew Israelite, even though he looked like a white person, because of his spirit, right? So even before I was in the truth, I had a disdain for Edomites, and there's no way I would be around an Edomite and feel comfortable, right? So that was a point there, and let me see. Oh, this is a good one again. Page 269. Yeah. So we're wrapping it up. So page 269. So now we're just getting into more what I will call Hebrewism, or things that are embedded in the Brazilian Indian culture that validates that they're Hebrew Israelites. So let me see. 269. Highlight a bit. Right. Let me read it. Right. Listen to this. In the past, the Tapirapi or Tapayarape rarely made use of forest land, listen to this, that had not lain fallow for 20 years or more. So the importance of that is we had a custom of giving land Sabbaths as well, right? So when it says 20 years or more, it's actually saying 21 years, because you wouldn't say 20 years or more, you just say 20 years. So once you add more, you're adding another year or another period of time. So if you check 21 or more, but I would say 21, that's actually 7 multiplied by 3. Because 7 and 7 is 14 and 7 is 21. So that's a Hebrew Israel, not Hebrew Israelism, a Hebrewism, right? Because that's in keeping with our law, statutes, and commandments as well, to give the land a Sabbath. And then on top of that, it has something here dealing with marriages. So let me read that. The other two are they continue their former rules of tribal endogamy, by which outside marriages are forbidden except on a limited scale with a karaha. So the karaha would be a closely associated tribe. So it would almost be like how when you saw Abraham instructed Isaac to go to I think it was Assyria or to marry a wife, and then his son was ordered to do the same thing. Not Esau, but Jacob was ordered to do the same thing, to go to Laban and marry a wife. So they would be, the Syrians actually would be like our cousins. So they would be like one of the outside group of people that we're permitted to marry, right? So this is what this is saying. And then I've got the precept here. I'm not sure if I'm going to go into it, but I'll just read out the precept. So I've got Tobit 4, chapter 4, verse 12. I've got Deuteronomy 7, 3 to 4. And I've got Nehemiah 13, 25, and then 27, just to validate. Right? So I have to kind of try and save time because the time's running out now. So, page 271. Right. So this one I'm going to have to break down because, bearing in mind it was written by an Edomite, so they tend to put their spin on what they see, or they put their perspective on what they're seeing. So I have to break it down because it would sound bugged out. But I'm going to read it anyway verbatim and just break it down. So this is the page 271. I'm going to read it. The Indians were preparing for a special festivity. All the girls who had their first menstruations were dressing themselves up in duck and parrot feathers. There's a similar festival that used to take place. It's in Judges, the last chapter of Judges. So that's where the Banyamin, the tribe of Banyamin, they sourced their wives because all of Israel swore oath that they would not give their daughters to Benjamin as wives. So they couldn't go back on their oath. So that Benjamin would not ceased to exist as a tribe, the compromise was okay. When the virgin daughters go to have that festival or that celebration, you go and snatch you up a wife because they were not betrothed to anybody else. Because the Most High doesn't give people license to sin either. So they were not betrothed. They had just passed the age of menstruation, and yeah, so you grab them up, and then once you grab them up, the father would have to agree, right? Because if you know the law, if a woman is not betrothed and you force her, you have to pay the father and you have to accept the exchange because you haven't actually committed the sin. You've broken the law of culture, but not the law, statutes, and commandments. So yeah, so let me break it down. So have their first menstruation, were dressing themselves up in duck and parrot feathers. Others were painted traditional designs in their body with a dye. At this feast, the young girls who had, through the ceremony, shown themselves to be women would be allowed to experiment with various suitors. So this is the bit that I have an issue with that, but it is what it is. I'm going to read it verbatim. Until they found a suitable partner, they would marry. They would only marry after they became pregnant. So for me, that's the Edomite spin of it, right? So, not that it's incorrect, but it's the Edomite spin on it because how we view things, and I'm quite sure it's the same with the indigenous people because they were a community that live amongst each other. How I would view this is when they met a suitable partner, meaning they met somebody that they fancied or the spirit took, then they would have sexual relations, they would come into the girl, then she would become the wife. Obviously, that would lead to pregnancy, right? But she would become the wife. But they added a twist to it. But be that as it may, that's also a Hebrewism, right? Because we believe that when you come into a woman, you're married to the woman. And this is what this is saying, even though they've worded it differently. That's what it's saying. So that's why I put that there as well. And oh, this is a good one. Page 276. So this one, I think I'm going to get the precept for this one. Because this is a good one. 276. I mean, all the Hebrewisms are good. I don't know why people are saying this is a good one, but all the Hebrewisms are good. So let me get the precept quickly. It's in First Timothy. Let's find it. Yeah. So this is the book of First Timothy, chapter 2 and verse 9. So I'm going to read the precept first. In like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly array. So we know that it's not particularly saying that you shouldn't dress or you shouldn't dress up nice and you shouldn't wear ornaments. It's not saying that. It says that, but that's not the intent. The intent is that a woman should be modest and she should not draw undue attention because what it is, it causes men to lust. Right, so now let me show you it first. I'm not sure if I showed you it before. Show you it. Right, and let me read it out. Page 276, and it reads, the elder women clothed in long sleeve and full skirted dresses, all of them with huge bundles of laundry. So this is detracting from the point. So the point is, let me read it again. The elder women clothed in long sleeved and full skirted dresses. In other words, in modest apparel. Right, so that's another Hebrewism again. And then, oh, page 304. So we're nearly at the end, Israel. So this time I'm sure I put you lot to sleep. But anyway, be that as it may, let me go to page 304 because there's something that is quite interesting there. I'm not going to use the word good again because I've used it to the point of being redundant. So let me show you. Highlight it. Yeah. Right. So let me read it. So this is proof of them keeping the Sabbath, but indirectly. So they're not coming out and saying, yeah, we kept the Sabbath. But just listen to the wording. Listen to this, right? So what happened was they rounded up the Indians and they threw them in jail. They had them in jail. And while they were in jail, they weren't working. They were doing stuff, but they weren't working. So listen to this. Today, the peasants jokingly referred to their imprisonment as their holiday. Certainly, it was the only time. Listen to this. I'm going to read it again. Today, the peasants jokingly refer to their imprisonment, when they were placed in prison, as their holiday. Imagine that. They said, yeah, man got locked up, and said, yeah, man went on holiday. Listen to this. Certainly, it was the only time in their lives that they had not been working 6 days a week. So what is that telling you? Because if they're working 6 days a week, that means that there's a day that they're resting. That's the Sabbath, right? So that one I read. So Deuteronomy 5 and 12. I can go Exodus 20 and 8 or Deuteronomy 5 and 12. So let me see which one. Because I'm in Deuteronomy anyway. So let me just go to 5 and 12. Might as well. So this is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 12. And it reads, keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee. And listen to this, verse 13. 6 days shalt thou labor. I mean, it's almost word for word. Look, it was the only time in their lives they had not been working 6 days a week. Look, read it again. 6 days thou shalt labor, 6 days, and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, Yahweh thy power. In it thou shalt not do any work. Can't make it up, right? So basically, I think I went through all of, or most of what I have highlighted here. So there's another thing I want to do, and this would be quick because there's no precepts. I'm going to go into the back of the book because it has a chronology or a timeline of events. So what I've done, I've highlighted some of, I mean, all of them are important actually, but I've highlighted some of them, which I'm going to read, right? Actually, I could, because I like to give the people the information as well. So take a snapshot of that. I'm going to read the highlighted ones and take a snapshot of that. I'm going to read the highlighted ones as well, right? So we're nearly done, Israel. So, all right. So this is the chronology, page 325. In the 1500s, the discovery of Brazil by Portuguese explorer Pedro Alvares Cabral. 1808, Portuguese royal family headed by King João IV moves to Brazil during Peninsular Wars. So the Peninsular Wars was when North Africa was fighting Iberia. So they have other names for it as well, but here is listed as the Peninsular Wars. The other name for it is the Barbary Wars. It just came back to me. So the Barbary nations would be Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Mauritania, and they were fighting against Portugal, Grenada, Spain, Sicily, Italy, or maybe Sicily was part of the Barbaries as well, to be quite honest. But that was the context of what they call the Peninsular Wars, but in history is known as the Barbary Wars. Um, 1821, Zhao the Sixth. So he would be the grandson, I believe, of King Zhao IV. Zhao the Sixth returns to Portugal, so which means they were living in Brazil for all that time after Napoleon's defeat. So this is important as well because Napoleon was defeated by the Haitians initially, and then by the British after in the Battle of Waterloo, if my memory serves me correct. Prince Pedro declares Brazil's Slovakia, 1822. Prince Pedro declares Brazil's independence and receives title of Emperor Pedro I. 1858, coffee becomes Brazil's main export. 1888, so this is an important year because it was the abolition of slavery. So if you notice the date, in America was 1868, 60, 70, 80. So 20 years after, Brazilian Indios and Negroes were still in slavery. 1889, Emperor Pedro II dethroned and the Republic established. 1890, separation of church and state. 1917, Brazil declares war on Germany. So if Brazil declared war on Germany, why is there a high concentration of Germans and Argentinians, Germans and Italians in Brazil? That should make you scratch your head. Because if they declared war against Germany and Italy was an ally of Germany, they shouldn't be going to Brazil. Why were they going to Brazil? So that's a question mark right there. 1942, Brazil declares war on Axis powers. Oh, so it answers the question. So now I can answer the question. So in the first instance, that's talking about the First World War. That's talking about the First World War. But now this is talking about the Second World War. But still, the point still remains because the Axis was Franco, which is the Spanish, the Italians, obviously the Germans, and I believe the Japanese had linked up with them as well, right? So they would be the Axis, right? So if they declared war against the Axis, that means they declared war on Germany. Why are there so many Germans and Italians and Polish there? That question needs to be asked. 1944, Brazilian Expeditionary Force sent to Europe. I bet a lot of people didn't know that. Containing numerous young officers who were to take power 20 years later. So, in other words, the same people that went and fought in World War II for Brazil, got military training, went back to Brazil and took over the country. That's basically what happened. 1955, Juscelino Kubitschek. Yeah, I think the S is silent. So Kubitschek, elected president by an alliance of the two parties set up by Vargas, Partido Trabalhista Brasileiro. So that's the Workers' Party of Brazil, and I know a little bit of Portuguese, which helps because the words are weird, man. Right, 1970. So this just the highlighted one. 1970, period of highly authoritarian government. Urban guerrillas groups became active, kidnapping the U.S. ambassador Berkey Elbert. All political activists are hounded by the army. And then the last set of highlighted things here is 1982. The government turns to IMF, which is otherwise known as the International Monetary Fund, and begins to reschedule foreign debt. This is important because listen to this now. 1983, the same thing happened in Trinidad, by the way. 1983, at the behest of the IMF, in other words, as a result of going to the IMF for financial help, this is what they did. The government imposes a tough austerity program, which, by the way, we just had 10 years of austerity, leading to the mess we're in now, which leads to a 3.5% fall in gross national product. So that actually sounds about right for this country as well. Um, Rioting by unemployed in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in Brazil. Um, 1984, despite despite enormous popular campaigns, the opposition parties failed by a few votes to obtain the necessary two-third majority in Congress to pass a constitutional amendment bringing back direct elections for president. So, which means they couldn't directly elect their president. They tried to get it passed and they were blocked. And then the last highlighted one is 1985. Tancredo Neves. Neves means snow, by the way. Tancredo Neves, the opposition's candidate, is selected as president by the Electoral College. So, which means Brazil has exactly the same voting system as they have in United States of America, and also as they had in apartheid South Africa. So the electoral college system isn't the person with the most votes wins the election. What they do, they divide up areas and allocate a certain amount number of votes to a certain area. And funnily enough, the areas that are predominantly Edomites have sometimes 10 times more votes than than the areas that are predominantly Negro or Hebrew Israelite. So that's a form of technology to keep power in it's like Psalm 83 then, to keep the power away from a certain group of people and to empower another group of people. So that's what the electoral college system entails. Um, and then the last one is 1985, the civilian government takes over, ending 21 years of military rule, bearing in mind that rule started 20 years after World War II. So the same guys that were in World War II 20 years later came back to Brazil and took over the country. And then, how many years later? 21 years later, they managed to eradicate themselves or extricate themselves from that situation. Right, so that's it. So Israel, like I said, this one in particular is special to me. Why is it special to me? Because the Most High. So let me give my praise first. Kal halalia hawa wa Hasham Yahushai. Kal halalia wa palalia wa kabadia Yahweh ala shadia hamalak hamashiach Yahushai. Brakatari Hawa, Brakatari Hawa Shai, Brakatari Hawa, Brakatari Hawa Shai, Anya Havatari Hawa, Anya Havatari Hawa Shai, Anya Havatari Hawa, Anya Havatari Hawa Shai, Kalhalali Hawa, Bashami Hawa Shai. Right, so I've got the prayers out of the way. So why it's special for me is because the Most High gave me this. It's basically a brand new book. Look at it. It's in such good condition. This was printed in 1985. And look at the condition of the book. It's like a brand new book. And the Most High gave it to me. Actually, he gave me two books. Because I found two books on the same day. Right, but this is the one I'm using today. And it's special because anybody that knows me will tell you I love books. If you give me a book, my face lights up. So the Most High lit up my face on the hottest day of the year with a book that's actually dealing with our history. So I'm so pleased to be able to share it with you guys. And with that, with that, I like to say, Abad Lababal, Mawak Lababal. Shalom, Israel.